Joining us now is the Industry Minister, Mélanie Joly. Minister, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure.
So I do want to begin with Kyle Seeback because he was asking about the job guarantees Stellantis made to the federal government. I'm wondering if you could walk us through what numbers, if any, were guaranteed in terms of jobs in exchange for government support.
I think that what is really, really important to remember is that first and foremost, the auto industry is victim of the tariffs, of the American tariffs. So for us, it's fundamental that we protect jobs, and Stellantis' decision to move production from Brampton to the US is completely unacceptable. So we're suing Stellantis because basically we had a deal, they broke it, and we want our money back. So that's our first point. Second point is, for those watching us at home and don't necessarily understand all the contracts and everything that is going on, what happened is, for the first time in 15 years, the government was able to attract jobs, to create jobs and attract investments in the Windsor area and also in the St. Thomas area, so in southwestern Ontario. And the goal was to build new battery facilities, yes, supported by taxpayers' money, which was essentially what the US was doing under the Biden administration. And we were competing against the US to be able to attract these investments. And through that, we were able to create already 1,000 jobs in Windsor and 1,500 to go, because basically production has just started. And so that's why for us, when we negotiated that funding to support the LG and Stellantis joint venture that is called Nexstar, we decided to say, well, if you want taxpayers' money, you need to protect the Brampton facility. And so that was the deal, and that's why we think that Stellantis is on the hook.
Okay, so to protect the Brampton facility, but did that translate into a specific job number for Brampton in your discussions with Stellantis?
What happened is there's two contracts. The first one was linked with a job number, and then there's an amendment to that contract, and in the amendment, that's where we link the Brampton facility. And so that's why you have to read both together. And obviously the opposition, rather than working as one Team Canada, pushing back against the Trump tariffs, or trying to blame the government for actually attracting investments and creating jobs, which I think is completely ridiculous. I think that Canadians see through all this. They want us to fight against the American tariffs as we're in this trade war. And so that's what I'm trying to do every single day. Fight against the American tariffs, make sure that Stellantis is on the hook, working with the workers and, of course, their unions, which is in this case Unifor, as one strong team, and making sure that ultimately we save the jobs in the auto sector in Ontario, period.
Now, you did tell a Commons Committee last week that you've served notice of default to Stellantis. And I'm wondering if there's been any signal from that car company that they are willing to get production back to Brampton sooner rather than later.
Well, so we're having conversations. I met also with the entire auto sector this morning, and all of them were represented. So Toyota, Honda, Stellantis, GM, and also Ford. And so these are the five OEMs, like we call. So basically the five automakers that are building cars in Canada. And we will continue to engage with them because they're extremely important. Let's all remember that we're talking about 125,000 jobs, direct jobs, in the auto sector, but because this sector has so much impact on other types of jobs, ultimately it's 500,000 jobs. There's no other sector in Canada that has this impact, economically speaking. So if we want to make sure that we protect these jobs, we need to make sure that we push back against Stellantis, because I don't want to open the floodgate of automakers leaving the country. And so this is a really important measure that we're putting in place and pushing back. And I really hope the Conservatives stop their shenanigans, which are making us lose time, and actually that we work as one strong Team Canada. And I think Canadians are expecting from us that we work as one. Last time we negotiated NAFTA, we worked as one Team Canada. Why aren't they now? I think that you can see my frustration. It shows how much it's counterproductive.
Well, I do wonder though, again, you're in the process of suing Stellantis. You put in that notice. The suit's not yet there. Any indication that they are willing to reconsider because you're moving forward with this type of, I guess, punishment for moving the plant?
We have to do both. So we have to be able to hold them to account, meanwhile continue to have conversations. You know, when I was in foreign affairs, we used to do that as well. We used to make sure that sometimes on certain issues we would pressure a country, and at the same time we would be able to engage diplomatically. You have to do both. And so Stellantis has started a third shift at Windsor. 4,500 people work in Windsor right now at their plant, at their assembly plant. Meanwhile, there's 1,000 new people working also at another plant in Windsor, which is that joint venture I was talking to you about between LG, a Korean company, and Stellantis, and they're building batteries, and they are in the midst of also hiring 1,500 people more. And so only that is actually 6,000 people. And so we need to make sure that we continue to engage with the company because there's 6,000 jobs on the line. But meanwhile, we're fighting for the 3,500 workers at the Brampton facility that have been laid off and that will continue to engage with the union to fight for.
Listen, before we're done here, because we're quickly running out of time, I do want to ask you and perhaps get some comment on concerns that were raised by U.S. industry leaders at those public hearings about trade in Washington last week. There was some concern expressed that Canada and Mexico, to be fair, were being used as back doors for Chinese materials to make their way into the U.S. despite import bans and tariffs imposed on China by Washington. I'm wondering if you're addressing that concern at all.
Well, obviously, we're working with the industry to make sure that the U.S. understands how much basically this free trade agreement we have is beneficial to Americans themselves as it is for Canadians. I think it is clear that at this point, Americans understand that tariffs are a tax, and that is having an impact south of the border. But at the same time, we'll continue to let the Prime Minister negotiate. We'll continue to let Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister in charge of U.S.-Canada trade, do his work. And I'm there to support them because obviously I used to work on the causes of the trade war, on the diplomatic front of it. Now I'm working on the consequences and definitely the economic front. And we know that the battle is the economy. Our front lines are our auto workers, our lumber workers, our steel and aluminum workers. And so we need to make sure that we keep them, that we protect their jobs and that we stand very strongly side by side with them.
Is there a role for industry, though, to play here, to essentially signal to the Americans that this country is not being used as a backdoor for Chinese products?
Trust me, that's what they do every single day. And there's lots of people going to Washington to advocate for their cause and defending Canada's interests. And we always work through the embassy and through our great diplomats back in Washington to make sure that that's the case.
Okay. Minister Joly, thank you for this. Really appreciate the time.
Pleasure. Thanks.